The organization that you set up seems about to be either made a toothless tiger or gutted for exactly what the reason you forecast might happen, an ideologically different administration.
Yes, we tried to write the law to stave that off, basically to try and prevent someone who was totally opposed to it from taking over. And the key there, that's what's really at stake here, is whether or not the president, who hates the organization, thinks there shouldn't have been one, doesn't like the idea of consumer protection in principle, if he is able to appoint someone to run it without having to go through Senate confirmation. That's what people are missing. If the president wins on this legal issue, he can name an acting director ad infinitum, so that if he names someone who the Senate wouldn't confirm, that doesn't stop him. And here's the point. The Senate is probably not going to confirm. The Senate wouldn't confirm a Mulvaney for the CFPB because there are Republicans who support the consumer agency.
But we end up with the farcical situation today where two people turn up, the deputy director appointed as the outgoing went, and Mulvaney under a vacancy appointment.
Yeah, and it'll be resolved by the courts. That's why we have courts. This is an issue. There was no alternative.
But did you forecast that this could happen? Was this in your mind, this sort of scenario?
No, we thought we had taken care of it by writing legislation that said if there was a vacancy, if the director couldn't serve, then he would appoint somebody. We believe the Trump people are not following the law. They obviously think they are, and that's what it'll go to court.
On the substantive issue of the amount of power given to the director, a guest earlier in our program said there was too much, that this person wielded more power than any other director in any other agency, basically judge and jury, and had been far too aggressive with the industry.
That is nonsense. You're talking about someone in the banking industry. This is a man who never found anything that was problematic until the place collapsed. I'd like to go back and see, well, he was for more moderate kind of protection. What was he for? But let me go to this one where he said all these terrible things. I've listened to Mulvaney, to Trump, to Mr. Hunt, to the others. They talk in general about how terrible this agency is. Have any of them ever given you one specific example of abusive behavior? I'm sure they haven't, because they don't have any. For all of their complaints that this is an agency out of control, they literally have not got a single horror story. Because the reason is that if you look at what the agency does, it helps people who've been overcharged by their credit cards. It helps people. I have a family member who had a student loan, and the loan was paid off, and they were being dunned again by a different company to pay it off again. Now, these people knew enough not to do it, but unsophisticated people wouldn't. But I do want to stress that for all of their complaints about the agency, have you heard in all of this a single instance where they have overreacted? Secondly, for the guy in the banking industry to say that is ridiculous. The controller of the currency is a single individual who is a major bank regulator and has a fixed term overlapping the president's term, and his agency is not subject to appropriation. It's all of the things that they say is terrible about the CFPB, but they don't like consumer protection, so they only complain about it there.
The way Dodd-Frank is being, it's not being gutted fully yet, but it is being filleted. Slowly but surely, in different ways, it's being salami sliced off. Does that worry you now?
Not as much as I thought it might, because, in fact, it's not that bad. The House passed a bill that would have killed the whole thing, but nobody took that seriously, and the Senate has ignored it. In fact, in a couple of areas, even the Trump appointees have said, yeah, we got it right. The head of the the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the single biggest grant of new power we put in the bill was to regulate financial derivatives, which were the wrecking balls and were totally unregulated. And Mr. Giancarlo, the chairman of that commission, has essentially adopted our scheme. Jay Powell, who is now the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, basically is somebody who accepts the basic framework.
And do you accept that a revision of the Volcker rule within it is warranted or merited?
Only for the banks that are under $10 billion. And here's what and the bill is, I think, going to go through that does that. We never thought that the banks that are under $10 billion in assets aren't really affected by it, but they have over complying. So I've supported since 2013 a proposal that we explicitly exempt them. But for the rest of the Volcker rule, for all these complaints, you ran that clip appropriately of Donald Trump talking about how his friends couldn't get loans. Nonsense. That has been statistically totally repudiated. There is no pattern of complaints of people in general in the business community not being able to get loans. By the way, to the extent that there is a problem getting loans, it doesn't come from our bill. It comes from the money laundering, bank secrecy, and the Patriot Act. But the argument that they can't get loans, there's just no evidence for it.
Finally, the Americans, with the rest of the world, watching what is going on at the moment and wondering how and why this situation has been allowed to deteriorate to such an extent.
Which situation?
Well, the idea of you end up with two bosses.
Oh, I see. In other words, people who are looking at the total shambles in England over Brexit can't understand why America is having this little dispute. And people can't understand, who see that Angela Merkel can't get a government together, are wondering why we can't get a director of the CFPB. I doubt your premise. I doubt that with all that's going on, we're the focus.
But they are when they see a president who then talks about fake news, and they see a president on the whole questions of
I share that concern about the president. I just disagree with this notion that, again, with what's going on in Germany, with what's going on in England, with no government of Northern Ireland, I wish things were going better. What?
In the bigger picture?
Oh, look, what we have here is a fact that you had a president who got elected by fooling a lot of people into believing that he was going to stand up for average citizens, and is now leading an assault and trying to dismantle the most effective thing we've done to protect average citizens. And so sometimes you go to court to have a dispute. But I have to say, and I regret that, but the American government is at this point less tied up than a lot of others. And here is the last point I would make, and that the reason they are doing it this way is, and the reason they are not trying to change it legislatively is, the American people support the Consumer Bureau. Any issues, they haven't brought up any issues because they know they would be on the wrong side.